Let me see. Is it now okay?
Yes, sir. It is okay for few sentences, but then it's cracking.
Cracks.
Yeah,
Let
and
me let me
interrupt.
speak slowly, and maybe that'll help. So I was simply saying that the fulfillment of the obligations demands that a country adopt the necessary measures in order to make sure that these rights are fully recognized and these rights are being met, and the countries are trying to see that they give resources in order to meet those rights. What I would do is probably I'll leave most of the rest of it out. I should mention that in the United States, economic, social, and cultural rights, they really don't have a great deal of currency. What has happened is that even human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Human Rights, many other organizations, they have focused on civil and political rights, and economic, social, and cultural rights are totally ignored. Recently, they have re-engaged themselves with some economic, social, and cultural rights, but not many. And the reasons are pretty obvious because torture, because a person's liberty being deprived, person is deprived of. Those make noises in the country. They stir people's imagination. They can give these organizations money. They can be co opted. But then economic, social, and cultural rights, they are not the ones, socio-economic rights, that can give them a great deal of visibility. So, in any event, what I did was I teach human rights, and one time I simply wanted to look at only economic, social, and cultural rights. And in socio-economic rights, then what I did was I did a comparative kind of study: India, some African countries, and the United States. And so, what I would probably do right now, very briefly, so that we can at least have some conversation also, what I will do is I will focus mostly on American scenario. Currently, the International Academy of Comparative Law that's going to meet in Lisbon. This is one of the areas that they are looking at. And for the United States, I'm the national rapporteur. So I have just mentioned, 10 times better than I do, that in Indian Constitution, the directive principles of state policy, they do not explicitly consider these directly enforceable, but these rights are there in order to give guidance to the government. And courts have been pretty good because they have given expansive interpretation of the constitutional right, that is right to life and right to personal liberty, in your Article 21. And I think based on the principle of human dignity and the protection that they have given to economic and social rights, including, and I had looked at them, right to adequate clothing, shelter, all those kind of basic necessities, nutrition, right to medical facilities, right to earn a livelihood, and even environmental rights. And a few cases that I had looked at, one case is Mullen, Francis Mullen, Union Territory of Delhi, and where the scope was extended of Article 21 to include the right to human dignity. And again, they are looking at shelter, clothing, nutrition, right to education. I had looked at another case against the New Delhi Municipal Corporation, and this was a case including all the basic necessities of life to be considered included in Article 21. And Article 21, then, in conjunction with the directive principles relating to education, health, conditions of employment, and to address the working conditions of child laborers also in the carpet industry. They had looked into it. I had looked at other cases also, and I was absolutely amazed to see how the Supreme Court of the United States has really done a wonderful job in expanding expanding the constitution and then we can address the working conditions of as forming part of an enforceable regime of fundamental rights. They haven't gone that far, but the question that I can pose is, can we say that it can be extended in order to do that? African countries, let me briefly simply mention that looking at the African Charter and then the African Court on Human Rights, which is going to be a new court now, and then the African Commission, and I have was very pleased to see that the Charter rights have to be looked into in view of all the international instruments, including the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And so the interpretation being guided by, interpretation extended by, looking into other international instruments, I think that's a wonderful idea, and that's what they have done. Let me just go very quickly and take about 10-15 minutes to give you an overview of what has happened in the United States. What happened in the United States is that from the very beginning,
Sir,
you
sir, I
have,
think,
yes,
I think, sir, due to technical error, we can take your notes and we will circulate it to all the faculty members and to all the students as well.
all right. You can't hear it now? Ashutoshi, can you hear it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, the voice cracks very often, sir. Maybe that the weather and the technology is not favoring us.
Can
Or
you?
maybe they are forcing that you have to come here and in physical you have to enlighten us, because there is lot
So
more recurrent. Uh,
I am very sorry about it.
no, no, no,
Let
that's
me
fine,
simply
because
let me
generally it
simply
does not
mention.
happen. Yeah, generally it does not happen. But I don't know today because of the weather. Perhaps the technology is linked with the weather. Maybe that is the reason. Because this is the first occasion in which we are having this disruption. Never before we had disruption to such an extent. So,
Yes.
yes,
So why don't I just send you the piece
yes, yes. Soft, soft
so
one.
that you can kindly circulate it and say that the American scenario on economic, social, and cultural rights is not the one that I'm very proud of, because the Constitution does not permit it. Constitution does not consider it as a fundamental right. The United States Supreme Court has consistently, over a period of time, and there are plenty of cases, in every case they have said that these are not fundamental rights. So unless it's in the Constitution, unless Congress has got enacted it, unless Supreme Courts have given it explicitly or implicitly the idea that they can be recognized, then obviously they cannot be enforced in the United States. But many states and many cities and many congressional enactments do provide these rights. And I simply want to mention to you that I consider the Indian Constitution, with at least having those rights interpreted very broadly, far ahead of the US Supreme Court at the present time. And let me conclude by saying that the reason for those negative rights is that the United States has been influenced more by Locke than by Rousseau. Because at the present time, for example, in France, you can see the state being the one to provide positive rights. But in the United States, the state is not going to provide any rights. You've got to go through then the courts to interpret it, but also at the present time to see that these rights are simply kind of secondary and they are not being given the prominence that they ought to be. So, Dean, I'm so sorry that I cannot
No, no, we are
conclude.
all sailing in the same boat, sir, because we are, it's quite embarrassing for us also. Maybe that we are also not that strong enough in the technology. And particularly you coming from the US must be having a bad experience with the Indian, all these. So we are all bearing.
I should have stayed.
Yeah.
I should have stayed in the US because from there I could have done this. There would have been no difficulty. I came all the way here and I can't talk.
Yeah, but I think so long as we can connect with ourselves, at least we can leave the
Yeah,
floor
thank you.
open for conversations. If we cannot hear in that uninterrupted manner your ideas, let us learn through the conversations, through the discussions, whatever, I mean, the floor is now, we are opening. So, as a matter of fact, we are really obliged to you, sir, that whenever you come here in India, particularly Delhi, you don't think of faculty of law. So, I deeply appreciate your this sentiment, which is attached with the faculty of law, and you always try to give your this learning and the thoughts with the faculty and the students. Just now, I was also hearing that very impressive profile which was read by my colleague, and I also read it in the mail also. And I was just wondering that if you can be kind enough to offer something to my colleagues, particularly young colleagues, if you can invite them to those institutions which you are heading there, which you are leading there.
Yes.
So you can invite my colleagues for a short period of time for any kind of a research, collaborative research. So that way we can strengthen our ties. We can strengthen our academic ties and institutional ties also. That's my request to you. That please think for these for my colleagues. So as a dean, I'm really concerned with these things. Um, and as far as whatever I could make out from your excellent on these conversation hearing. As a matter of fact, when you have given three topics, it was me who have chosen this topic, right? Even though the war topic is very, I mean, currently the war is going on. Many of the people will jump to that topic. Women issues was another area, but still, even though I'm also I'm a student of women studies, but still I have chosen this one. Why? Because this is an area which is evergreen and which is talked about not only in constitutional law classes, but I believe in all the classes, particularly I mean in the other disciplines which are new coming up, whether we talk about the women rights, whether we talk about the other person's right. The thing is which I would like to understand from you also, sir. um, um, on the one side, we say that these are human rights. We say these are economic human rights, social human rights, cultural human rights. But then we find whatever, I mean, very beautifully you have described and we could make out that they have been neglected, they have been ignored when it comes to the justiciability or when it comes to their enforceability. And the things which are getting in terms of human rights, the rights which are getting prominence happen to be those civil and political rights. So out of five rights, it is only two rights, civil and political, which are gaining prominence. So one of my question is, which I would like that you explain to us. So is that mean that whatever that whole concept and the framework, I'm talking about international framework of human rights is, it has prioritized the rights, it has categorized the rights, which are the rights which are more important and which are the rights which are subordinate. So is it really goes is it in consonance with the concept of human rights? Because your first sentence was all these five rights are universal, interchangeable, and they depend on one and another. If that is so, then how can, I mean, these rights can be, which have been ignored, how can they be ignored and only those two rights can get the prominence? Why I say so is, in specifically, because when we analyze this framework, whether it is UDHR or it is those two covenants of 1966, UDHR talks about all five rights. We know that. No discrimination in UDHR. But then it's a declaration, it's not binding. But when that declaration was made a binding instrument, why it was split into two? And I think the root cause of international framework starts from 1966, when UDHR, one document containing all five rights, was split into two different documents in the name of giving them binding that nature. So, and then the domestic jurisdictions, as you have very nicely explained, the US jurisdiction as well as Indian jurisdiction follow the same, that we are having directive principles of state policy for these three rights and our fundamental rights for other those two rights. Now, just I will take 1 minute because that I really want that my scholars should speak up. You know, we also analyze, sir, as you are studying on social, economic, and cultural rights, just now you told us. Sir, we also examine these social, cultural, economic rights from the point of view of the gender, particularly the woman. And we say that this whole framework where civil and political rights have been given prominence is patriarchal model. Why? Because the person who's active in civil and political rights is a man. So man's right have been protected, man's right have been made enforceable, but the social, cultural, and economic rights here in the life of the woman revolves around these rights, and their rights are made not justiciable, as the whole title says, and as you have explained it. So another my question will be, sir, to you, which I would like to know is, you have also mentioned, but I will just need elaboration on that. Also, I mean, tell us some of the countries, if any, whose constitution has not uh, prioritized these five human rights, where social, cultural, and economic rights. Is there any constitution in the world where social, cultural, and economic rights are also justiciable? So we would like to know that also from you, sir. Um, so I stop myself here.
No, but thank you very much. I think human rights issue has been pretty politicized, and as you know, it fell prey initially to the Cold War, because as Cold War descended, then the Western countries simply wanted to use the hammer in order to tell Russia and to tell the communist countries that you don't have civil and political rights. And because you don't have civil and political rights, then those rights are the ones that matter, and you don't have them, and you are the one who are deficient about it. You recall that what happened really is that after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when the thought was that we should have only one covenant, then at that time, because of the Cold War, nothing could happen, and the United States focused primarily, exclusively on civil and political rights. And that goes back to its own common law heritage. because as you can see from the very beginning, you can find that it has always been focusing on civil and political rights, not economic, social, and cultural rights. And that is really where I had mentioned to you Locke and Rousseau, and the focus on linguistic focus in the
Okay.
United States. And the United States have economic and social, civil and political rights. You can give them a right to vote, but if the people cannot feed themselves, what does the
Yes,
right to vote mean?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And the United States simply said that economic, social, and cultural rights, you can be in a jail. You have clothing, you got shelter, you got the basic necessities met, but is that sufficient? And as you rightly said, then the idea in Vienna conference on universality of human rights, indivisibility of human rights, that all these human rights are but in practice, you can see that at the UN Commission on Human Rights, United Nations itself, it had always been politicized. A few years ago, my students and I, we looked into what the United States reports on human rights. As you probably know, that the United States has, at the present time, in its own statute, requirement that each year the State Department present to Congress a report on human rights around the world.
Mhm.
And we inspect them. Those reports. And those reports not their own deficiencies and simply leave them out. And again, put a whole lot of emphasis on the deficiencies of countries that it did not like. And you probably remember the distinction between totalitarian and authoritarian states. And they said totalitarian states are not good because you cannot change them. Authoritarian states are also not good, but at least you can change them. And then I was asking a question that if you're being tortured, should you raise your head and say, are you authoritarian or totalitarian? If you're authoritarian, you can do that. But if you're totalitarian, you can't. So I think the point simply is that you are absolutely right. It got totally politicized, and therefore the focus was simply on civil and political rights. And second point that you are making is a very, very important point because women and vulnerable people, and these are indigenous people. These are people who are at the present time somehow not able to stand up on their own. Women are not in that category. Women stand up on their own and they are better than men in almost every field. I have got in my own school, and I am the faculty advisor for the Denver Journal of International Law and Policy. And I think the other day I sat and looked around and they had 8 women and 1 man because we slept. And I looked at all of them and I said, why is he there? You should all be women. So I think the point simply is that you are right. At the present time, they are even more discriminated in terms of these rights. So I think we need to see that discrimination stop. And I totally agree with you. I'm very delighted that you mentioned all that. And I think that today, if I had discussed the United States scenario, I would have brought all those facts before you and I'll send them to you. I'll stop here, and I think if there are a couple other people who
Yes.
want to participate in this conversation, it would be great.
Yes. Now, any one of you can. I don't know what is the method. Have you taken the questions, or they will straightway ask it?
Ma'am, I've received some questions.
Okay. So you can read them. Okay. Before you read it, sir, just I want to share one instance with you. In those places where there are more women and less men, and you talked about one man and eight women, generally it happens that the leader is a man, even though that's one, or is in minority. So that is also one of the things we are having, that men may be less, but they are the topmost. Women may be more, but they are at the lower rank. So it is not only the number, it is also what positions they are holding. Yes.
I have written a lot on this women's issues, and I'll send you a couple of those
Yes, yes,
pieces
sir.
because I have very, very forcefully said that, for example, on peace issues, war and peace issues, women have got very little to say. They are not in that diplomatic setting where they are the ones who can make decisions, and they ought to be in decision making role, in policy making, in decision making. Their imprint is much more useful than that of men, and I can compare them, and I can say that very, very, I think, convincingly on that count. So I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you for the compliment to the womanhood. Himani, you can proceed further and bring the questions to sir.
Yes, ma'am. Sir, the first question is, there have been several incidences throughout the world when the human rights have been jeopardized and they could not receive any justice, and the reason was due to lack of awareness of rights or maybe lack of awareness of legal processes. What is your view on this?
My view on that is a very simple one, that this politicization of human rights must stop, and that human rights, as they were supposed to be, because Eleanor Roosevelt, when she began the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, at that time the thought simply was there should be non-discrimination as the basic tenet on which the entire foundation should be built. And I think that is what the need is. And at the present time, unfortunately, human rights is the one that are simply being used by countries in order to meet their own ends.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is, how do you think the overturning of Roe versus Wade justice will affect the constitutional jurisprudence globally, and in particular relating to the rights of women globally?
At the present time, you probably remember that the latest sustainable development goals, one development goal is women empowerment and gender equality. And you probably remember that and I wouldn't call it a slogan, that goal, that aspiration began in earnest from Beijing. At that women's conference, the goal was empowerment, women empowerment, and gender equality. And before that, it was in Millennium Development Goals also. But then all these years have passed, and that goal has not been reached. At the present time, I just completed a study and looked into parliaments in the world, looked into executive positions in the world, looked into corporations, looked into decision making, looked into policy making, and found that at the present time, still women not only earn about 70% compared to the man in the same kind of job, but they are not given at the present time equality that has been purportedly a goal of human beings for a long period of time. So I think that change has to come about, and it's taking time in order to get there.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir, for taking us through the very intricate details on this subject and joining us for today. Now, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Usha Tandon Ma'am, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, to preside over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Whatever I had to talk, I talked, but now here I will leave the floor open for my other scholars and the teachers if they would like to interact. Because what I wanted to ask that I had a conversation. So other colleagues or the scholars, if you have any other question or any other, it may not be necessarily a question. It may be something which you would like to contribute also.
I like to hear comments from them, and I like to hear some advice from them or
Yes,
me.
that's what I'm saying. Anything which you would like. Yes, Ayush, you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I can't even hear you.
Yes, the same with us also.
Are you still not audible? Write in the chat box.
Yeah, we cannot hear you, Ayush. Yes, there is one Sonu Kumar. Is he a PhD scholar? Is he a PhD scholar, Sonu Kumar? Are you there?
Yeah, he's here.
Yes.
He's here.
Okay, you are a PhD scholar with law faculty?
सोनू जी बोलिए.
हाँ, आप PhD scholar हैं यहाँ?
नहीं मैम, हमारी आवाज जा रही है मैम? हेलो.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. नहीं, ये generally chat है. Can anybody help me to understand whether he is our student?
नो मैम, मैं बिहार से पटना से जुड़ा हूँ और मैं यूट्यूब से जुड़ा था और मैं सोचा कि गूगल मीट पर जुड़ूं, सर का सुनूं. मुझे बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण जानकारियां मिल रही थी सर से, मैं इसीलिए जुड़ा था.
अच्छा, ठीक है. अगर आप कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं तो पूछ सकते हो, नो प्रॉब्लम.
Sonu ji,
This country is really so far advanced in technology. So next time that I come, kindly see that technology doesn't stand in my way and your way.
Yes, I think that's very well said. well said, sir. So, Himani, you can invite for the vote of thanks.
Okay, ma'am.
But Dean, before you do that, I simply wanted to know that as I go back, I'll be sending you, talk with you about, you talked about your colleagues wanting to study or wanting to do research. So I'll talk with you about that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. That will be great help. I really
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Ashutosh Acharya, sir, to propose the vote of thanks. Sir is Assistant Professor at Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I think my camera is facing some issues. Not able to switch it on.
No, but we are surviving all that. And then we are connected.
All right. So please
Why should
pardon
you
me for that. So I think some days are like this only, and we have to face these issues and continue with our programs. So pardon me for the video thing, but I'll be as clear as crystal as far as my voice is concerned. I believe so, and so I thank first of all Professor Nanda sir for sparing time, his valuable time, to deliver a lecture on justiciability of economic, social, and political, economic, social, and cultural rights. It is true that it's kind of an ignored right, especially if I talk about SAARC region, not only talking about India, but the Southeast Asian region also. So it's the importance of it lies in the requirement, and we have already talked a lot about civil and political rights, and it's the right time to talk about justiciability of economic, social, and cultural rights. So thank you so much, sir, for uh, enlightening us with your views and sharing your views as far as these rights are concerned. Sir, thank you also for agreeing to share your notes, since we could not listen to you as far as whole of your speech and your knowledge and information is concerned. But I'm sure with your notes, we will certainly benefit a lot, and we will certainly share it amongst our faculty members and students. So thank you for that. And also, thank you for answering all the questions with brevity and in a simplistic manner. That shows your wisdom and knowledge as far as the subject and hold on subject is concerned. So again, I thank you with whole heart from the side of Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. And it's true that you're always there. I myself personally have listened to you all the times whenever you were here in the last 4 to 5 years. And it's always a pleasure listening to you. So thank you so much, sir. Secondly, I thank our head and dean, Faculty of Law, Professor Usha Tandon, ma'am. Ma'am is the torch bearer, an able leader, I would say, and she leaves no opportunity to invite distinguished guests and academicians, and she leaves no stone unturned with which faculty members and students can gather knowledge and can have and exhaust opportunities with respect to sharing of knowledge. So thank you so much, ma'am, for continuing this process, for leading us so nicely. So thank you so much for everything, ma'am, for all the lectures and programs that have already happened, and for all the programs that are yet to come. And I assure you, ma'am, we are all with you in this task. So thank you so much, ma'am. Then I would thank all the participants, the students that have joined today, which includes our faculty members, PhD students, and other scholars. And last but not the least, the engine of this program and other programs, Dr. Ashutosh Mishra, who is always ready and enthusiastic to organize all the programs at Faculty of Law, the convener of the committee of seminar and conference committee, Dr. Ashutosh Mishra. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the lead and utilizing your organizational skills so well, and taking care of all the programs. Thank you so much, sir. And I would thank Dr. Saival Satyarthi, sir, and Dr. Ajay Sonawane, sir, for taking care of the program, for being an important part in organization of this lecture. And lastly, without the support of the students, no program can be completed. So first of all, I would thank Himani, and secondly, I would thank Ayush Tripathi for taking pain and sparing the time to conduct and host this particular program. Thank you so much. I wish you a good day and a good weekend. Namaskar.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, sir.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, sir. I mean, I will say, despite all these odds, despite the non-cooperation from the technology or from the weather, I think to a certain extent we were successful in our mission, if not wholly. So thank you so much, sir, and for connecting
Thank you, sir.
with us.
Pranam, sir.
The stars were not aligned,
Thank you, ma'am.
but we somehow muddled through. So thank you.